After paying for a burger for an old man, the manager of McDonald's fired her. 2 hours later, everyone was in shock. Sarah Johnson adjusted her red and yellow apron for the umpteenth time that morning. At 35, every wrinkle in her McDonald's uniform seemed a reminder of the daily struggles she faced. With a sigh, she glanced at the clock on the wall. There were still 4 hours left in her shift. "Order ready for table 5, shouted the cook from the kitchen. Sarah grabbed the tray and headed to the indicated table. As she walked, her mind wandered to her 16-year-old daughter, Emma, who would be getting out of school at that moment. She wondered if she had remembered to take her asthma medication. Then, as always, her thoughts shifted to her mother, Mrs. Johnson, and the worry over her growing medical expenses. "Here you go, sir, enjoy," Sarah said with a tired but genuine smile, placing the tray in front of a middle-aged man. She returned to the counter just in time to see an elderly man enter. He walked slowly, leaning on a cane, and his eyes scanned the menu with some confusion. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" Sarah asked kindly. The elderly man looked at her with watery eyes and a shy smile. "Good afternoon, young lady. I'd like a coffee and maybe a small burger. I haven't eaten anything since the morning." Sarah nodded and began to take the order. When it came time to pay, the elderly man searched his pockets with trembling hands. He pulled out some coins and counted them with difficulty. "I'm very sorry," he finally said, his voice breaking with shame. "It seems I don't have enough. I thought I had enough. Excuse me, I'll just go." Sarah's heart tightened. Without a second thought, she pulled out her own wallet. "Don't worry, sir, I've got it," she said quietly, swiping her card through the reader. The elderly man looked at her with surprise and gratitude. "Oh, I can't accept that, young lady. That's very kind, but—" "I insist," Sarah interrupted with a warm smile. "We all need a hand sometimes. Please enjoy your meal." With tears in his eyes, the elderly man took his tray and sat at a nearby table. Sarah watched him for a moment, feeling a mix of satisfaction and concern. She knew she would miss that money, but she couldn't bear the thought of someone going hungry. What Sarah didn't notice was the cold gaze of her co-worker, Mark, who had witnessed the entire scene from the adjacent register. With a twisted smile, he headed to the manager's office. The rest of the shift passed without incident. Sarah was cleaning tables when the manager, a stern-faced man named John, called her to his office. "Sarah, we need to talk," John said, closing the door behind her. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She knew that tone of voice, and it never boded well. "What's wrong, Mr. John?" "I've been informed that you paid for a customer's meal with your own money today. Is that true?" Sarah blinked, surprised. "Yes, sir. It was an elderly man who didn't have enough money. I couldn't let him go hungry." John sighed heavily. "Sarah, I understand your good intentions, but that goes against company policy. We can't allow employees to pay for customers. It creates accounting problems and can lead to complicated situations." "But sir, it was just this once. I promise it won't happen again," Sarah pleaded, feeling panic start to overtake her. "I'm sorry, Sarah. You've already received warnings for being late due to your mother's health problems. The company requires employees to follow the rules to the letter. I'm afraid I have to let you go." The words fell like a punch to Sarah's stomach. "Please, Mr. John, I need this job. My daughter, my mother." But John was already extending an envelope with her severance pay. "I'm sorry, Sarah. Collect your things and turn in your uniform before you leave." With trembling legs, Sarah left the office. Tears threatened to overflow, but she held them back. She wouldn't cry, not here. She took her belongings from the locker, changed mechanically, and walked out the back door of the restaurant. Once on the street, the tears began to fall. How would she pay the bills now? How would she keep Emma in school? And her mother's medications? As she walked to the bus stop, a thought crossed her mind. Had she done the right thing by helping that old man? For a moment, doubt engulfed her. But then, she remembered the gratitude in the man's eyes and knew that, despite the consequences, she didn't regret her action. With a shaky sigh, Sarah boarded the bus. She didn't know what the future held, But she was, determined to face it, with the same compassion and strength that had always defined her. As the vehicle moved through the city streets, Sarah closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of weakness before having to face her family with the news of her dismissal. What Sarah didn't know was that her act of kindness had set in motion a series of events that would change her life forever. Fate, capricious as always, had very different plans for her. 2 weeks after the incident at McDonald's, Sarah found herself sitting at the small kitchen table in her apartment, surrounded by newspapers open to the job section and a half-finished cup of cold coffee. Emma, her daughter, was at school, and the apartment's silence was only interrupted by the ticking of the wall clock and Sarah's occasional sigh of frustration. She had spent the past days sending resumes to every place she could think of, from fast food restaurants to clothing stores, but so far she hadn't had any luck. The bills piled up on the table, and the fear of not being able to cover the expenses grew day by day. The phone rang, breaking the silence and startling her. Sarah hurried to answer, hoping it was some response to her job applications. "Hello? Am I speaking with Ms. Sarah Johnson?" asked a male voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, this is she. How can I help you?" "My name is Robert Williams. I'm the owner of the McDonald's franchise where you worked. I'd like to talk to you about an important matter. Would it be possible for us to meet today?" Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The owner of the franchise? What could he want with her? "Of course, Mr. Williams. Where would you like to meet?" "How about at the Corner Cafe at 3 p.m.? Sarah looked at the clock. There were 2 hours left until the proposed meeting time. "Yes, I'll be there." "Thank you very much." After hanging up, Sarah stared at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. Why would the franchise owner want to talk to her? Could it have something to do with her firing? Uncertainty gnawed at her, but she also felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this meeting could change things. At 2:55 p.m., Sarah entered the Corner Cafe. It was a cozy place with wooden tables and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee floating in the air. She scanned the room and saw a well-dressed middle-aged man sitting alone at a table in the back. When their eyes met, he smiled and gestured for her to come over. "Ms. Johnson, I'm Robert Williams. Thank you for coming," he said, standing up to greet her. Sarah shook his hand, noting the warmth of his smile. "Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Williams." They sat down, and a waiter came over to take their order. Once they both had their drinks in front of them, Robert began to speak. "Ms. Johnson, I invited you here because I have something important to discuss with you. 2 weeks ago, you helped an elderly man at McDonald's, paying for his meal out of your own pocket. Do you remember that?" Sarah nodded, feeling a pang of pain as she remembered how that act of kindness had cost her her job. "Yes, I remember." Robert smiled. "That elderly man was my father." The surprise left Sarah speechless for a moment. "Your father? I had no idea." "I know. And that's what makes your act even more admirable. You didn't do it expecting anything in return, but out of pure kindness." Robert paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "My father has early-stage Alzheimer's. Sometimes he goes out for walks and gets confused. That day, he had forgotten his wallet at home. When he came back and told me what happened, I was deeply moved by your story." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm glad I could help, Mr. Williams. I'm very sorry about your father's illness." "Thank you. But that's not all. When I found out you were fired for that act of kindness, I was outraged. That's not how I want my business to be run." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. Could this mean? "Ms. Johnson, I've come to offer you a job. I don't just want to rehire you. I want to offer you the position of general manager of the restaurant." Sarah was stunned. "General manager? But I've never been a manager. I don't know if I'm qualified." Robert raised a hand to stop her protests. "I've looked into your work history, Sarah. I know you're hardworking, honest, and compassionate. Those are the qualities I'm looking for in a manager. Technical skills can be learned, but integrity and empathy are innate, and you have them in abundance." Tears began to form in Sarah's eyes. "I don't know what to say, Mr. Williams. This is incredible. Say yes, Robert smiled. I offer you a competitive salary, full benefits, and the opportunity to make positive changes in the restaurant. What do you say? Sarah took a deep breath, trying to contain her emotions. Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Mr. Williams. I won't let you down. I'm sure you won't. And please call me Robert. He extended his hand to seal the deal. Welcome aboard, Sarah. As she shook Robert's hand, Sarah felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders. Not only had she gotten her job back, but now she had the opportunity to make a real difference in the lives of her coworkers and customers. What Sarah didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The challenges she would face as a manager would test her compassion and integrity in ways she had never imagined. But for now, as she left the cafe with a radiant smile, all she could think about was how excited Emma would be when she told her the news. Fate had taken an unexpected turn, and Sarah was ready to embrace the change with all her heart. Sarah's first day as general manager at McDonald's dawned bright and full of promise. She woke up before her alarm went off, with a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling in her stomach. As she got ready, she mentally reviewed everything she wanted to achieve. Are you nervous, Mom? Emma asked, watching her from the kitchen door. Sarah smiled at her daughter. A little, honey, but more than anything, I'm excited. You'll do great, Emma affirmed, with the unwavering confidence of youth. You're the best. With a hug for her daughter and a quick call to check on her mother, Sarah left the house, ready to face her new challenge. Upon arriving at the restaurant, she took a deep breath before entering. The familiar aroma of coffee and freshly baked muffins greeted her, along with the curious and surprised looks of her former co-workers. Good morning, everyone, Sarah greeted with a smile, trying to project a confidence she wasn't entirely sure she felt. John, the former manager who had fired her, approached with a tense expression. Sarah, welcome back. Mr. Williams informed us about your new position. I'll be here to help with the transition. Sarah nodded, grateful for the offer despite the evident discomfort. Thank you, John. I appreciate your help. As the morning progressed, Sarah immersed herself in her new responsibilities. She reviewed schedules, inventories, and financial reports. She soon realized that, while there was much to learn, her years of experience on the front lines gave her a unique and valuable perspective. During the lunch rush, Sarah decided to put on the apron and help in the service line. Some employees looked at her with surprise. What are you doing here, boss? Asked Mark, the same one who had ratted her out weeks ago, with a tone that bordered between curiosity and disdain. We're a team, Mark, Sarah replied calmly, and sometimes the team needs an extra hand. As she worked alongside them, Sarah noticed how the initial tension began to dissipate. Her former co-workers appreciated seeing that, despite her new title, she was still the same. Sarah willing to roll up her sleeves and work hard. At the end of the day, she gathered all the staff for a brief talk. I want to thank you all for your hard work today, she began. I know this change can be unsettling for some of you, but I want you to know that my door will always be open. Together, we can make this place not only a great restaurant for our customers, but also a great place to work. The reactions were mixed. Some, like Lisa, a cashier who had always been kind to Sarah, smiled openly. Others, like Mark, maintained skeptical expressions. In the days and weeks that followed, Sarah worked tirelessly to earn her team's trust and improve the restaurant's operations. She implemented an anonymous suggestion system for employees, reorganized schedules to give more flexibility to those who studied, and ensured that everyone had adequate breaks during their shifts. She also focused on improving the customer experience. She introduced a reading corner in one corner of the restaurant with books donated by the community. She organized family nights with activities for children and made sure the restaurant participated in local community events. However, not everything was rosy. Mark, resentful of Sarah's promotion, began sowing doubts among some employees. Doesn't it seem strange to you? Sarah heard Mark murmuring one day in the break room. Suddenly she's fired, and the next moment she's the boss. Something fishy must have happened. Sarah knew she would have to address this situation soon. But for now, she decided to focus on the positives. and there were many customers noticed the changes, and the more welcoming atmosphere. Sales began to increase, and the restaurant started receiving praise on local social media. One afternoon, while Sarah was closing the office, Lisa timidly approached. Ms. Johnson. She began. Sarah is fine, Lisa. She smiled. Sarah, I just wanted to say that, well, we're very happy to have you as our manager. You've made so many good changes here. With a lump in her throat, Sarah thanked her for the gesture. It was moments like this when she felt she was truly making a difference. That night, as she dined with Emma and her mother, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time. How's everything at work, dear? Mrs. Johnson asked. Sarah smiled. It has its challenges, Mom. But you know what? I think I'm exactly where I need to be. What Sarah didn't know was that soon she would face her biggest challenge yet, a challenge that would test not only her managerial skills, but also her integrity and compassion. 3 months had passed since Sarah assumed the role of general manager, and the restaurant was flourishing under her. Leadership sales had increased by 15%, staff turnover had significantly decreased, and the establishment had become a popular meeting spot in the community. However, one Monday morning, Sarah arrived at the restaurant to find a chaotic scene. A group of angry customers crowded the counter, while employees looked overwhelmed and confused. What's going on here? Sarah asked, making her way through the crowd. Lisa, with a pale face, approached. Sarah, the systems are down. We can't process card payments, and half of the kitchen machines aren't working. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. All right, this is what we're going to do, Lisa. Please explain the situation to the customers and offer them a discount coupon for their next visit. Mark, call the technician immediately. I'll handle the kitchen. As Sarah dealt with the crisis, she couldn't help but notice the satisfied smile on Mark's face. Did he have something to do with this chaos? As the day progressed, the problems seemed to multiply. Suppliers called to inform her of delivery delays, and a health inspector showed up unexpectedly for a surprise inspection. Sarah handled each situation with calm and efficiency, but she could feel the stress building up. Then she saw a familiar figure enter through the front door. Robert's father, the elderly man she had helped months ago. The man looked confused and agitated. Where is my son? He asked customers, who looked at him with a mix of pity and discomfort. Without hesitation, Sarah approached him. Mr. Williams, do you remember me? I'm Sarah, the manager. Why don't you come with me to my office? We can call your son from there. The elderly man looked at her with eyes clouded by confusion, but something in Sarah's warm smile seemed to calm him. He followed her docilely to the office. Once there, Sarah offered him a glass of water and called Robert. While they waited, she chatted gently with Mr. Williams, distracting him with stories about the restaurant and asking about his youth. When Robert arrived half an hour later, he found his father laughing with Sarah as they shared a burger. Sarah, I don't know how to thank you, Robert said, visibly moved. There's nothing to thank me for, she replied with a smile. It's what anyone would do. After Robert took his father home, Sarah returned to the chaotic reality of the restaurant. To her surprise, things seemed to have calmed down a bit. Lisa approached her with a relieved smile. The systems are back up, she reported, and the health inspector was very impressed with our procedures. He said we were one of the best managed establishments he had seen. Sarah felt a wave of pride and gratitude toward her team. Excellent work, everyone. We couldn't have handled this day without each of your efforts. As she prepared to close that night, Sarah noticed Mark in a corner, speaking quietly on the phone. She caught snippets of the conversation. Yes, sir, no, it didn't work. She handled everything too well. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Was Mark conspiring against her? And with whom? She decided it was time to address the situation directly. Tomorrow, she would have a serious conversation with Mark. She couldn't allow resentment and negativity to undermine everything they had achieved. As she closed the restaurant door, Sarah realized that this day, despite all its challenges, had been a trial, by fire, and she and her team had come out victorious. What Sarah didn't know was that this trial was just the beginning. Larger forces were at play, and she would soon find herself at the center of a storm that would threaten not only her job, but everything she believed in. With one last look at the restaurant, Sarah headed home, unaware that the real challenge was just beginning. The next morning dawned gray and rainy, as if the weather reflected the tension Sarah felt as she prepared for her confrontation with Mark. She arrived at the restaurant early, determined to resolve the situation before the day got underway. "Mark, can we talk in my office, please?" she asked as soon as she saw him enter. Mark's expression was a mix of surprise and wariness as he followed Sarah. Once in the office, Sarah closed the door and sat behind her desk, trying to project a calm she didn't entirely feel. "Mark, I've noticed that you seem dissatisfied since I took over as manager," Sarah began. "I want you to know that I value your experience and your work here, but I also need to know if there's any issue we need to address." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah. Everything's fine." Sarah looked at him steadily. "I heard your phone conversation last night, Mark. I know. Something's going on. I'd prefer you to be honest with me." Mark's face paled for a moment, but he quickly composed himself. "It's nothing, Sarah. I was just talking to a friend about personal problems." Before Sarah could press further, a knock on the door interrupted them. It was Lisa, with a worried expression on her face. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but there's someone who insists on seeing you. He says it's urgent." With a sigh, Sarah stood up. "We'll continue this conversation later, Mark." As she exited the office, Sarah came face to face with a man in a suit whom she didn't recognize. "Ms. Johnson? I'm Detective Ramirez. I need to talk to you about some financial irregularities we've detected at this establishment." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Financial irregularities? There must be some mistake." Detective Ramirez shook his head. "I'm afraid not. We have evidence of fund diversion and tax evasion dating back several months. As the general manager, we need your cooperation for this investigation." Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. How was this possible? She had personally reviewed all the books since taking over, and everything had seemed in order. "Of course, Detective. You have my full cooperation," Sarah replied, trying to maintain her composure. "Can we talk in my office?" As they walked back to the office, Sarah noticed Mark watching them with a mix of nervousness and something that looked like guilt. During the next few hours, Sarah provided Detective Ramirez with all the financial records of the restaurant. Together, they reviewed every transaction, every receipt, every report. As they delved deeper, Sarah began to notice small discrepancies that had previously gone unnoticed. They were subtle, but they were there. I can't believe it," Sarah murmured, feeling a mix of shock and betrayal. "Detective, I assure you I had no idea about this." Detective Ramirez looked at her with an inscrutable expression. "Ms. Johnson, these irregularities began before you took over as manager. However, as the current person in charge, you'll need to answer some questions." Sarah nodded, feeling dazed. "Of course, I'll do everything in my power to resolve this." As the detective prepared to leave, promising to return with more questions, Sarah was left alone in her office, trying to process everything she had discovered. How had she not noticed before? Who was behind this? Suddenly, the conversation she had overheard from Mark took on a new meaning. Did he know something about these irregularities? Was that why he had been so hostile toward her? Sarah knew she had to act quickly. Not only was her job at stake, but also her reputation and the integrity of the business she had worked so hard to improve. With determination, she began meticulously, reviewing every document, every record, searching for clues that could lead her to the truth. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't notice the hours passing, the restaurant closing, or the night falling over the city. It was the sound of her phone that finally pulled her from her concentration. It was Emma. "Mom, are you okay? It's very late and you still haven't come home?" Sarah looked at the clock and was surprised to see it. It was almost 11 p.m. "I'm sorry, honey. I've had a complicated day. I'll be home soon, I promise." As she put away the documents and prepared to leave, Sarah couldn't help but feel like she was on the edge of a precipice. On one side was the police investigation that threatened to destroy everything she had built. On the other, the growing suspicion that someone inside the restaurant might be involved in these irregularities. When she arrived home, she found Emma asleep on the couch, evidently waiting for her. With a guilty sigh, Sarah covered her with a blanket and headed to the kitchen, where her mother waited with a cup of hot tea. "Dear, what's going on? You look pale," Mrs. Johnson asked. Concerned, Sarah collapsed into a chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the day on her shoulders. "Oh, Mom, everything's getting complicated at work. There's an investigation into financial irregularities, and I'm afraid of losing everything." Mrs. Johnson took her daughter's hand in hers. "Sarah, my dear, I know you, I know. You're honest and hardworking. If there's a problem, you'll solve it. You always do." Her mother's words gave Sarah a bit of the strength she needed. That night, though sleep was slow in coming, Sarah promised herself that she would get to the bottom of this matter, no matter the cost. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah divided her time between keeping the restaurant running smoothly, cooperating with Detective Ramirez's investigation, and conducting her own internal investigation. One afternoon, while reviewing old records in the storage room, Sarah found something that chilled her to the bone. It was an alternate set of accounting books, carefully hidden behind some boxes. Upon examining them, she realized they showed the true extent of the financial irregularities. With trembling hands, Sarah took out her phone to call Detective Ramirez, but she stopped. What if this implicated innocent people? What if there was more at stake than she knew? She decided she needed more information before taking that step. She put the books in her bag and headed to her office, determined to confront the only person she believed could have answers: Mark. However, upon arriving at her office, Sarah was met with a surprise. Robert Williams, the franchise owner, was waiting for her with a somber expression. "Sarah, we need to talk," said Robert, closing the door behind her. Sarah's heart raced as she sat down across from her boss. Did he already know about the investigation? "Robert, But before she could continue, Robert raised a hand to stop her. "Sarah, I know about the investigation and there's something you need to know." For the next hour, Robert revealed a truth that left Sarah stunned. The financial irregularities were not recent. They dated back years, long before she joined the company. The previous financial manager, in collusion with some employees, had been diverting funds and evading taxes for years. "When I hired you, Sarah, I hoped that your honesty and dedication would help us correct the course without raising suspicion," Robert confessed. "But it seems I underestimated the severity of the situation." Sarah felt betrayed and used. "Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Why leave me in the dark?" Robert looked down, ashamed. "I was scared. Scared of losing everything if this came to light. I thought we could fix it little by little." "And now what?" Sarah asked, feeling a mix of anger and disillusionment. "Now," Robert sighed, "I need your, help to do the right thing." Sarah found herself at a moral crossroads. On one hand, she felt obligated to report everything to the authorities, immediately. On the other, she understood Robert's fear and the consequences this could have for all the innocent employees at the restaurant. "I need time to think," Sarah finally said, standing up. "This is too much to process at once." Robert nodded, understanding. "I get it. But Sarah, please remember that I trust you. I know you'll make the right decision." That night, as Sarah walked back home under a gentle drizzle, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. What was really the right decision in this situation? Report everything and risk innocent people losing their jobs? Or try to fix things from within, risking becoming an accomplice to a crime? What Sarah didn't know was that her decision would have consequences that extended far beyond the restaurant, affecting not only her life but the entire community. As the city lights reflected in the puddles at her feet, Sarah realized she was about to face the greatest challenge of her life, a challenge that would test not only her integrity but also her compassion and leadership ability. With a deep sigh, Sarah prepared to make a decision that would change the course of her life forever. The next morning dawned gray and cold, as if the weather reflected Sarah's inner turmoil. After a night of sleeplessness and reflection, she had reached a decision. It wouldn't be easy, but she was convinced it was the right thing to do. With determined steps, Sarah entered the restaurant before it, open to the public. She gathered all the staff, including Mark and Robert, in the dining area. "Thank you all for coming in so early," Sarah began, her voice firm despite the nerves she felt. "There's something important I need to discuss with you." The employees looked at each other, confused. Robert, for his part, looked tense, anticipating what might come next. "As some of you may know, there's an ongoing investigation into financial irregularities at this restaurant," Sarah continued. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. "What you might not know is that these irregularities date back several years." Sarah paused, observing everyone's reactions. Mark looked particularly uncomfortable. "I've made a decision," Sarah announced. "We're going to be completely transparent with the authorities and the public. We'll reveal everything that's happened and present a detailed plan to correct these errors." Robert stood up pale. "Sarah, are you sure about this? The consequences could be—" "I know what the consequences could be, Robert," Sarah interrupted gently. "But I believe it's the only way to save not just the business but also our integrity." She turned to the rest of the staff. "I understand this is shocking, and that many of you might be worried about your jobs. I promise I'll do everything I can to protect those who were not involved in these irregularities." A tense silence filled the room. It was Lisa who finally spoke. "Sarah is right," she said, standing up. "We can't keep hiding this. If we want the community to trust us, we have to be honest." Gradually, other employees began to nod and murmur their agreement. Mark, however, remained silent, staring at the floor. "All right," Sarah said, feeling a wave of relief and determination. "Here's the plan." Over the next few hours, Sarah worked with Robert and the team to prepare a public statement and a detailed action plan. They called Detective Ramirez to inform him of their decision to cooperate fully with the investigation. The news broke like a bomb in the community. Local media swarmed the story, and soon the restaurant was surrounded by journalists and cameras. Sarah, with Robert's support, gave a press conference in front of the restaurant. With a clear and firm voice, she explained the situation, admitted the mistakes made in the past, and detailed the plan to correct them. "We understand that we've betrayed our community's trust," Sarah said, looking directly into the cameras. "But we are committed to making things right. From today, we commit to total transparency in our operations. We invite our customers and the community to be part of this renewal process." The initial reaction was mixed. Some applauded Sarah's honesty and courage, while others expressed their outrage and called for a boycott of the restaurant. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah worked tirelessly, cooperating with the authorities, implementing new financial control systems, and meeting with concerned employees and skeptical customers. One day, while Sarah was in her office reviewing some documents, Mark entered unannounced. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," he said, closing the door behind him. Sarah looked at him, noting the guilt in his expression. "I'm listening, Mark." I knew about the irregularities," Mark confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "The former financial manager asked me to help cover up some transactions. I was afraid of losing my job if I refused." Sarah felt a pang of disappointment, but also of understanding. "Thank you for telling me, Mark. I appreciate your honesty. You'll need to speak with the authorities, but I'll do everything I can to help you if you fully cooperate." Mark nodded, tears in his eyes. "I will, and Sarah. I'm sorry for being so difficult with you. I was scared and angry, but now I see you're exactly what this place needed." As Mark left the office, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning of a long process of healing and rebuilding. But for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. What Sarah didn't know was that her decision to be transparent would have a much greater impact than she ever imagined. Her story was about to become an example of ethical leadership that would resonate far beyond the walls of that McDonald's. As the weeks passed, the media storm around Sarah's McDonald's began to subside, but its effects were still palpable. Sales had plummeted in the first days after the revelation, and some employees, fearing the stigma, had quit. However, Sarah remained firm in her commitment to transparency and integrity. She implemented an open kitchen system, allowing customers to see how their food was prepared. She also organized weekly community meetings where neighbors could voice their concerns and suggestions directly. One day, while Sarah was cleaning tables during a particularly slow shift, an older woman approached her. "Are you Sarah, the manager?" the woman asked. Sarah nodded mentally, preparing for another complaint or criticism. To her surprise, the woman smiled. "I wanted to tell you that I admire what you've done here. Not many people would have the courage to do the right thing at their own expense." Moved, Sarah thanked her for the gesture. It was the first positive comment she had received from a customer in weeks. Slowly, the community's attitude began to change. Sarah's honesty and continued efforts to improve did not go unnoticed. Sales began to recover slowly, and new customers, drawn by the restaurant's story of integrity, began to come in one day. Sarah received an unexpected call. It was a producer from a popular national news program. "Ms. Johnson, we'd like to interview you for our Leaders of Change segment. Your story has caught our attention, and we believe it could inspire others." Sarah hesitated for a moment. The idea of exposing herself nationally scared her, but she also saw an opportunity to share an important message. "Okay," she finally replied, "but with one condition. I want my team to be part of this too. It wasn't just my decision. We've all worked hard to turn things around." The day of the interview, the restaurant buzzed with activity cameras and lights filled the dining room, and Sarah's team, dressed in their freshly pressed uniforms, waited. Nervously, the interviewer, a middle-aged woman with kind but penetrating eyes, began. "Sarah Johnson, a few months ago, you made a decision that many would consider business suicide. What led you to reveal the financial irregularities at your restaurant?" Sarah took a deep breath before answering. "It was a difficult decision, but a necessary one. I believed, and still believe, that honesty and integrity are fundamental not just in business but in life. We couldn't build a future on rotten foundations." The interview continued, with Sarah sharing the challenges they had faced and how the team had worked together to overcome them. Lisa spoke about how transparency had improved employee morale. Even Mark, visibly nervous, shared his redemption experience. When the interviewer asked about the future, Sarah smiled. "Our goal now is not just to be a good restaurant, but a good neighbor. We want this place to be an example of how businesses can operate ethically and still be successful." The interview aired a week later, and the impact was immediate. Social media filled with positive comments, and the hashtag #EthicalLeadership trended. The restaurant experienced a sudden increase in customers, many traveling from other cities just to meet Sarah and her team. But most significantly, calls and emails began pouring in from other managers and business owners, seeking advice on how to implement more ethical practices in their own companies. Robert, impressed by the turn of events, offered Sarah a promotion to oversee ethics and social responsibility for the entire franchise. But Sarah, after much reflection, decided to decline. "I appreciate the offer, Robert," she told him, "but my place is here, with my team and our community. We still have a lot of work to do." A year after the day Sarah decided to reveal the truth, the restaurant celebrated its transparency anniversary. The place was packed with customers, employees, and community members sharing stories and laughing together. At one point during the celebration, Emma approached her mother with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I'm so proud of you," she said, hugging her tightly. "You've changed so many lives, including mine." Sarah, her heart overflowing with emotion, looked around. She saw Lisa laughing with some regular customers, Mark teaching a new employee with patience and kindness, and Mrs. Johnson chatting animatedly with Robert's father. In that moment, Sarah realized that her initial act of kindness, the day she helped an old man pay for his meal, had set off a chain of events that not only changed her life, but touched the lives of many others. As the sun set, bathing the restaurant in a golden light, Sarah smiled. The journey had been hard, but every challenge, every obstacle had been worth it. because in the end, she had discovered that the true measure of success wasn't in the numbers on a balance sheet, but in the integrity with which one lived one's life and the positive impact one could have on others. And so, in a small McDonald's in the heart of the city, a new story of hope and business ethics had begun. A story that, without Sarah knowing, was inspiring others across the country to lead with compassion, integrity, and courage. 2 years had passed since that fateful day when Sarah decided to reveal the truth about the financial irregularities. The McDonald's that once teetered on the brink of collapse had become a model of business ethics and social responsibility. One spring morning, Sarah arrived at the restaurant as usual, but something in the air felt different as she entered. She was met with an unusual silence. Suddenly, the lights turned on, and a chorus of voices shouted, "Surprise!" All the staff, along with Robert, Emma, Mrs. Johnson, and even some regular customers were there, surrounded by balloons and banners. Lisa stepped forward with a small trophy shaped like a golden M. "Sarah," Lisa began, her voice filled with emotion, "today marks 2 years since you made the brave decision that changed our lives. We wanted to surprise you and thank you for your leadership, your integrity, and your compassion." Sarah, overwhelmed with emotion, could barely hold back the tears as she accepted the trophy. On the base, an inscription read, "To Sarah Johnson, for teaching us that integrity is the best ingredient." As Sarah thanked everyone, the restaurant door opened. A man in a suit entered, followed by a camera crew. Sarah recognized him immediately. It was the CEO of McDonald's nationwide, Ms. Johnson, the CEO said, shaking her hand. "I've come, personally, to congratulate you. Your story has inspired changes throughout our organization. We want you to know that, thanks to your example, we've implemented new ethics and transparency policies in all our restaurants nationwide." Sarah's heart pounded. She had never imagined her decision would have such a wide impact. The CEO continued, "Additionally, we'd like to offer you a new role. We want you to lead our new Department of Ethics and Corporate Social Responsibility. Your experience and integrity are exactly what we need to guide the company towards a more ethical future." Sarah was stunned. It was an incredible opportunity, but it also meant leaving behind the restaurant and community she loved. She looked around, seeing the expectant faces of her team, her family, and her customers. Taking a deep breath, Sarah responded, "I greatly appreciate this offer. It's an honor to be considered for such an important position. However, my heart is here, with this community and this team. We've built something special together, and I feel there's still much to do." The CEO smiled, as if he had anticipated that response. "I completely understand, Sarah, and that's why I have an alternative proposal. How would you feel about leading a pilot program from here? You could implement your ideas and ethical practices in this restaurant, and if they succeed, we would expand them nationwide. This way, you could continue working with your community while having a broader impact." Sarah's eyes lit up. It was the perfect opportunity to combine her love for her community with the chance to make a larger-scale difference. "That sounds perfect," Sarah replied enthusiastically. The announcement was met with applause and cheers. Emma ran to hug her mother, while Mrs. Johnson looked on proudly from the side. In the months that followed, Sarah's restaurant became a laboratory for ethical innovation. They implemented integrity training programs for employees, established partnerships with local suppliers to promote sustainability, and created a scholarship fund for employees and their families. The impact was remarkable. Not only did financial results improve, but the restaurant also became a community hub. Other, local businesses began approaching them for advice on how to implement more ethical practices. One day, while Sarah supervised a new recycling initiative in the restaurant, she noticed an older man watching from a nearby table. As she approached, she recognized the elderly man she had helped. That fateful day, Robert's father. "Mr. Williams, what a joy to see you," Sarah greeted. The elderly man smiled, his eyes bright and clear. "Sarah, my dear, you know that day you helped me. I thought it was just an act of kindness, but now I see it was much more. It was the beginning of something beautiful." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Williams. Your son and you gave me an opportunity that changed my life." "No, Sarah," the elderly man replied, taking her hand. "You changed ours and many more." As the sun set, bathing the restaurant in a golden light, Sarah looked around. She saw Mark training a new employee with patience and kindness. Lisa was explaining the new recycling program to a group of interested customers. Emma, now working part-time at the restaurant, chatted animatedly with Mrs. Johnson and some regular customers. In that moment, Sarah realized that her journey was just beginning. Each day would bring new challenges, new opportunities to do the right thing, to inspire others, to make a difference. With a smile, Sarah headed to the kitchen. There was work to be done, lives to impact, and a legacy of integrity to build. And she couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. Because in this small McDonald's, in the heart of the city, a new story was being written. A story of ethics, compassion, and the transformative power of doing the right thing, no matter the consequences. And Sarah, the woman who once feared losing everything, now knew she had gained something far more valuable: the chance to change the world, one burger at a time.